So now, time to welcome in our first guest, and he's a man who knows a little something about playing here in Chicago and in New York as well. He's a man who made his mark primarily in New York with the New York Yankees. One of the hardest throwers, one of the most intimidating players in baseball. Please welcome the Goose, Rich Gossage.
All the top names, all the all-stars in the Yankee pinstripe. That's why he brought in Goose Gossage.
Goose Gossage was the most dominating, imposing relief pitcher in the game.
He's going to come out and shut you down.
He had that intimidating stare. When he started to deliver the ball, his arms were flailing, his legs were coming, and by the time he released the ball, it seemed like he was right on top of it.
I grew up an Oriole fan, so I learned to really despise this man, because when he came in, it was over. The two-time American League saves leader. You see it in 75 and 80, excuse me, a 9-time All-Star. 3 times he made appearances in the World Series. Goose, good to have you with us. As I lean over and say hello, thanks so much for being here.
Buddy.
I know that I know you have memories certainly of Chicago and of New York, but I wonder if we could go back in time to the very beginning, your first ever appearance here, wearing a White Sox uniform, back there in Wrigley Field. What happened? How did you nearly kill an icon?
Well, I'll tell you, I showed up for the game. I was out of Appleton, Wisconsin, A-ball, and they needed somebody to fill in and pitch in the Cubs-Sox rival, you know, the
crosstown thing.
Just a crosstown thing. And I came, they outfitted me when I got to the ballpark over here at Wrigley, and I'll never forget, I've never been so scared in my whole life. I've only been that scared about 5 times in my whole life. And
how old were you?
And I was like 19 years old. And
look at the youngster. Look at young Goose.
They outfitted me with a Sox cap, and it was like 2 sizes too big.
Right.
And every time I got to about right here to release the ball, when my arm started forward, the hat would fall down in my eyes like this.
Right.
And I had no idea where home plate was. Well, the first guy I faced is Ernie Banks. and Ernie comes up, and there's about a 2-minute standing ovation. I'm thinking, I'm going to kill Ernie Banks in front of all these people because I have no idea where this ball is going to go. And I've never been so petrified in all my life. And it was the first time that I'd ever been in a big league ballpark. It was the first time that I'd ever seen a real big leaguer in the flesh.
But I understand you made the paper the next day, and the headline was "Blinding Speed." They had a picture of your cap hanging in your eyes.
I did. It was the whole backside of the Chicago Sun-Times with me in this hat falling down in my face. It was you couldn't even see my whole face was covered by this hat. So, but I survived the thing. And Mayor Daley, I remember he was at the game, and I mean, I've never been so petrified in my whole life.
What did he have when he got here and played with you, son?
Well, that's what I want to know. I mean, I grew up in Kansas City. You constantly shut down the Royals. I've seen all of this and that. And then all of a sudden, you put on a Cub uniform, and you come, we're all excited. What happened to the fastball? You were throwing sliders there.
There were a lot ended up in the bleachers out there, Ricky. I feel badly because it wasn't the kind of season that I wanted to have for the Cubs, and I can tell you I enjoyed playing here as much as I did any place because Wrigley Field and the Cubs and we had a pretty darn good team that year. If I'd have held up my end of the bargain, we'd have probably ended up making the playoffs, but. It was a great experience playing here. I love Chicago. I played
Has there ever been a more stand-up guy than him?
The honesty is the honesty that we love, and the fastball and the big goat that's still hanging in there, which is a lovely thing to see. Hey, sit tight. We want to talk more about memories. We want to talk about Yanks, Sox. We want to talk about Zim as well. We got to do that.
Sure.
Sit tight as well as home. We're going to be back with plenty more from Wrigleyville. This is the ESPN Classic Chicago Roadshow presented by Miller High Life.
Welcome back to the ESPN Classic Chicago Roadshow presented by Miller High Life. We're at Wrigley Field. Field, of course, home of the famous Chicago Cubs. The famous marquee at Clark and Addison has welcomed Chicago Cubs fans since the early 1930s. The original facade was a fern green porcelain, but it was painted bright red in 1960. Well, yesterday, one of the people I got to catch up with was the legendary Don Zimmer. Don and I talked a little Ernie Banks. We also talked a little Goose Gossage.
Well, I played third base alongside of him for 1 year. The next year, I played mostly at second base. And to this day, I can hear it ringing in my ear, let's play two. That was one of his big lines. Then he would say, look up at the scoreboard. Because at that time, when you looked up at the scoreboard, they were all Cubs were the only game playing in the daytime. He said, isn't that a beautiful scoreboard? Let's play two. He came into the clubhouse yesterday. I said, Ernie, I don't want to hear that baloney about let's play two. He's a great guy, and I had a lot of fun playing with him. And I feel honored that I got to play with him of the things that he accomplished.
We're working with Goose Gossage. Been asked to see if you have a message for him.
Well, Goose, the Goose. I can remember pitching the last game in Fenway when Yastrzemski popped up in a one-game playoff. I wanted to choke Goose at that time. But we're good friends, and Goose was a great pitcher.
Well, we're about to find out if you're really good friends or not, Goose. Zimmer talking about 78. One of the most memorable games, certainly in the history of a franchise that has more memories than anybody. Take us through what happened that afternoon in Fenway Park as you remember it as the game went on. Your eyes are getting big at me. Were you really as scared as you said you were?
Hey, I was as scared as when I faced Banks when my hat was falling in my face.
So from the time your hat almost blinded you to then, that's the worst nerves you've ever felt?
It was hard to even put one foot in front of the other. I'd played, I'd pitched in a lot of big ball games, but never of anything that magnitude where you come down to the end of the season and you're all tied up and identical records, and then have to go into Fenway and play a one-game playoff. If there's one park that you don't want to play a one-game playoff,
here's the highlight right
Fenway.
here. 78. Yeah. Here's Yaz, and the second off Guidry, and that's a pesky special, isn't it? We've tied it up at ones. Then Bucky Dent. I'll let you talk about the memories. You're the one that was there.
Well, he wrapped it around the foul pole, and then Bucky had a cracked bat, and he went back, and Mickey Rivers said, hey, use this. Use my bat. And he takes it back up and hits his home run. So.
And here you are. What are you feeling here in the seventh inning, the emotions?
I am numb. The umpire was talking to me at one point, and I had no idea what he even said to me. And I came into the ball game in the seventh inning with one out, so I ended up pitching 2 2/3 innings, and I came in with a lead 5-2, and ended up making it 5-4 real quick.
Lou made a great play, though. A great play.
And, yeah, Piniella, I gave Piniella the save, but...
your knees literally shaking? I mean, that's what I've read you said. Were they literally shaking?
They were shaking, yeah. And you know what? When Yaz came up right there, I started talking to myself and answering myself. So,
what?
It was real scary. And I thought, you're not having any fun. And I thought, well, why aren't you having any fun? And I said, you've always played this game for the fun and the love of it. Yeah. And I said, I'm not having any fun, and it's, I'm damn sure in love. And I just said, what's the worst thing that could happen to you? And I said, well, I'll be back in Colorado tomorrow elk hunting. And it just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. In the first pitch, I had a lot of time to talk and answer myself because Yaz was getting a standing O for a couple more minutes.
As he deserved.
And, oh, God, a great hitter. And I went to bed the night before thinking, hey, I'm going to be facing Yaz for the final out.
Knew it was coming.
And that's what I said to myself when he came up to the plate. I said, well, this is what you went to bed last night thinking about. Wow. And I said, why are you so scared and blah, blah, blah. And then I threw the first pitch was down in the strike zone, for a ball. And then the next pitch was the ball that you just saw him pop up on. And after the game, after all hell broke loose, we went back in the clubhouse, and I went into the trainer's room, and that was a crazy club, just a tiny clubhouse. And I went in kind of just to get away from everybody and kind of gather my thoughts. And I was sitting on the training table, and Munson walked in, and he said, where'd you get that fastball? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, that ball had another foot on it, but it was just because I relaxed.
Scotty, I got to tell you, watching that video and seeing Ron Guidry brings back my first memory of Goose. I'm with the Cleveland Indians in 1982. Guidry's got me down 1-0 in the ninth inning. We got a base hit, we got a bunt single, and he walked the guy. Well, all of a sudden, the gates open,
Right.
and the car. Remember the car that you?
Sure.
Yeah, he comes riding. He's pulled out of the car, and I get my first look at Goose Gossage. We got the heart of our lineup coming
And the
up.
base is loaded.
Bases loaded, nobody out, and I go, well, I know we're going to at least tie it. I'm going to
win the game,
bottom of the
baby.
ninth. He threw 9 pitches, and I'm not. He won't admit it, but he remembers.
I don't
it.
remember.
9 pitches. He struck out Toby Harrah, Mike Hargrove, and Andre Thornton. And the only guy that fouled the ball off was Hargrove. He takes me to dinner that night. Hargrove does. He said, "Sud, I'm sorry." He says, "But I got to tell you, when I fouled that second pitch off," he says, "it was like taking a bat and hitting a moving freight train." He said, "I didn't even want to swing at the next pitch." So the legend had already began at that point. That was like the heart of it. And then he finished off a terrific career.
Sud, I've always said, that's why I was a great reliever, because I couldn't remember what the hell happened yesterday.
Yeah, well, it's remarkable that you remember 78 so well, but you don't remember that. The modesty joining us here real quickly. Hey, before we let you go, we want to delve a little deeper into the mind with a little segment we call Under the Hood. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you.
God.
All you got to do is answer. Just first thing that comes to your head. Answer honestly, please. What was the last CD you purchased? The last CD?
I don't
Do
know.
you listen to music?
Oh, yes.
Okay, but you don't remember.
Probably an old Neil Young tape.
Fair enough. Which teammate could outdrink Billy Martin?
Nettles.
He's on the way. We'll let him address that. What's bigger, Lake Michigan or Ricky Henderson's ego?
Ricky Henderson's ego.
Ricky's got tenure. What would your wife say is your worst habit?
Boy,
There's so many.
yeah, I wouldn't know where to start.
All right, last question before we let you go. If we were to give you a framed photo of Don Zimmer, what would you do with it?
I'd hang it in my house.
Well,
Keep all the mice out.
Well, then I tell you what we're going to do. You want to keep the mice out? There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Zim.
Oh,
It's a framed photo of Zim. How about it? And this is your gift from us to you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'll get it signed for you, too.
All right, thank you. He probably wouldn't sign it for me.
Well, it's yours to keep. You can do with it the way you like. Goose, it's great to
Thank
have
you,
you with
Scotty.
us. And thanks for sharing the
man.
memories
Ricky,
with us.
Awesome.
Thanks, Scott.
All righty, and coming
Been a
up
pleasure.
next, Ron Santo's going to join us here. This year's the ESPN Classic Chicago Roadshow presented by Miller High Life. Don't move. We're coming right back from Wrigleyville. Welcome back once again to the ESPN Classic Chicago Roadshow presented by Miller High Life. One of the great cities in the land, a gorgeous view of the skyline over Lake Michigan. City skyscraper, some of the world's tallest. Lakeshore, how good is that? Great city. And considered the second city, the birthplace of modern architecture. Hey, we're over here in Wrigleyville, a little more quaint. All the good people in Chicago, the hardy folks who are staying with us because they're ill. And we appreciate them for doing that. And it's very important that they stick with us. Well, we're going to talk about a lot more traditions here. Cubs, Yankees, Wrigley, leading you up to baseball. Baseball tonight, 7 Eastern over on ESPN. Then the baseball game coming your way at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Now, when these teams got together back in the day, Babe Ruth, famous called shot. Did he really call it? Who's to say? You look back in time and get the perspective of many who saw it and make your own decision.
Bruce in the outfield, he messes up a play, lets the Cubs tie the game. So he comes to bat, second man up the next inning, nobody on base. And the crowd is now all over him. He just messed up a play in the outfield, the great Ruth, and they boo him and hoot him, and Ruth is looking at the crowd, yelling at the Cubs are yelling back at him. Charlie Ruth's on the mound, Babe Ruth's at bat. And Charlie's getting mad because Babe is talking to the bench and yelling, and he says, "Go on, get in there and hit." And I think that's when Ruth sort of made a gesture at the mound, because Gehrig, who was on deck, said, Ruth said, "Put the ball in here, I'll knock it down your damn throat." And he just belted the hell out of the ball, hit it to center field, the uppermost part of the center field bleachers. No one had ever hit a ball that far before. It was just stunning. The fact that he pointed or didn't point doesn't matter a damn. He was challenged by the Cubs, and he stuck it to them. It's the greatest moment in baseball history. I really think so.
Tommy Henrik will join us a little bit later with his perspective on that. He knows the Bay, knows Gehrig as well. 10,000 extra seats built in 32. Demand was so great so folks could see the game from Sheffield and Waveland. Now, we're going to time to welcome in our next guest, a man who, as a young lad, once said he dreamt of being a ball player or joining the circus, and said famously, playing for the Yankees, I got to do both. Help us welcome now one of the great third basemen of his era, New York Yankee great, Padre as well, Graig Nettles, joining us now here on the Classic Chicago Roadshow.
The real star on the team was Graig Nettles. And the reason was Graig Nettles happened to be one of the funniest human beings I've ever met in my life.
Well, I can remember Nettles, who was one of my true warriors. If I had to pick the real guys that I'd want to put in a ring with anybody, that would be one.
Garvey, a low, and a play by Nettles at third base. I've never seen such a burglar.
Looking like Brooksy before him, one of the great World Series performances ever. A couple of World Series wins with the Yanks, led the American League in home runs and popping that bat. A six-time All-Star Graig Nettles he's dry, and he joins us now. Greg, happy that you didn't have to be out there with us in the speed pitch. Thanks so much for joining us once again. I know this week has been an interesting week for you because back in your career in the early 70s, 74, I guess it was an incident with a bat and some Super Balls and some what have you. And obviously with what happened with Sammy this week, I'm sure people have been reminiscing. Just to clear the record, what exactly happened in that instance?
Well, in that instance, I can honestly say that I did use a doctored bat, but I only hit one home run with that bat, and I got caught in the next at bat. A friend of ours on a team, a guy named Bill Sudeikis, said that he had a guy that could fix a bat for you that nobody would ever notice, So I said, yeah, let's do it. The pitchers are cheating. Everybody's cheating. So, the pitchers are scuffing the ball. They're throwing spitters.
Sut would never scuff
They're stepping a foot in front of the rubber before they throw the ball.
Especially some of them I threw to him.
Yeah,
I should have.
So I said, let's see if we can get something going. So I hit I hit a home run with it, hit the scoreboard in Shea Stadium when we were playing at Shea Stadium that year. And the next time at bat, the ball hit right where the bat was cutting to, and the end of the bat came off. I got caught, and it was not that big a deal in those days.
You were honest, no suspension.
Well, the reason that I got no suspension was there was no rule about a suspension until I got caught. Now, the reason the guys are getting suspended now is because I got caught. Because now it was the Nettles rule that if you get caught with a doctored bat, it's a fine and a suspension. So that's the reason I did not get any suspension.
We'll talk about the another bad incident, the pine tar incident, in just a moment, because you and George Brett had your moments as well. Just a quote here, George Brett, on the rivalry you two had between Kansas City and New York. The Royals and Yankees hated each other. It was the way baseball was meant to be played. They were hard-fought games, very, very physical. You guys actually got into it once. There was a little brawl.
We did.
Yeah. See ya. That ball was smoked, by the way. I don't care how much pine tar was on.
Well, it would probably be better if I'd have gotten a fight with George before that at bat, because then he wouldn't have taken Goose so deep.
Yeah, Goose, that was one of the hardest balls. Now, here we go. Pine tar, and this is one of the all-time great reactions in sports history.
Yeah.
Everything's cool. I'm good. Wait a minute. He's as mad as... What are you saying right there? What are you saying?
I knew we won. I knew we won the argument. And because I knew what the rule was, and George used a bat that had too much pine tar on it, which was a stupid rule at the time, but it was a rule. And I know that Munson had gotten called for the same thing a couple years earlier, and so a rule is a rule, and we called George on it. We won it at the time, but Lee McPhail, the league president, changed the rule and got it right. I mean, he made the right decision. A guy hits a home run off a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, you shouldn't take anything away from him because he had too much pine tar on the bat.
What recollection do you have of the incident that you two had in third base there when you guys got tangled up?
Oh, George and I got in a little scuffle at third base in the playoffs. I don't remember what year it was, probably 77, 78.
Guidry's always on the mound.
Yeah. Well, George came in and slid into me at third base. I had slid in hard the day earlier into their second baseman. And now George slides into me, and we get into a scuffle.
He came up throwing, man.
Well, he did, but he made the mistake of doing it in front of our dugout.
Yeah.
And by the time their dugout got over there, he had some bruises.
All right, now we played a little game earlier with the Goose, so we're going to do the same thing with you right now, if that's all right.
Goose is a liar.
Well, is he? Okay, well, we're going to go under the hood now, and we talked about what you said earlier about maybe wanting to join the circus. What indeed was your favorite circus act? Favorite circus act?
Oh, but it had to be when they hired Billy Martin back after they fired him the week earlier. They hired him back as next year's manager.
They should have put a 10 over Manhattan at that point. I'm curious, have you ever met anyone else named Greg? Not Craig or Greg, Greg. R-E-G.
You know, I've had people write me letters saying, "Dear Craig, you're my favorite player. I named my son after you." So I know that they got it wrong.
Did Bucky cork his bat?
Oh God, no, no. Bucky wouldn't think of doing that. No, no. That was just the fact of Mike Torres pitching us to two pennants in a row, one in 77, 178.
Who'd have won the fight if Billy Martin and Reggie Jackson really got into it in the dugout in Fenway?
Probably Billy, because he would have struck first, and once Billy strikes,
later.
Yeah, right.
All right, final question: who was faster, George Brett or you? Who's faster?
Runner?
Yes.
Oh, George by far.
Well, we're going to see right now if that's actually the case. We're going to tee up some wonderful memories here inside the park home runs, and let them go.
Oh my!
Who's going to? You had an inside the park home run. I find that stunning.
I found it stunning too.
Well, you look good to me. You're still in pretty nice shape to me.
I was coming off a very big illness at that time. I had hepatitis at that time. That was my first game back, and it was something that I did not want to do.
Well, you made it around the track, and you made it through your segment here with us, and we appreciate that. And in honor of you visiting with us, we have a bat with a little bit of pine tar on it. As a memory of this day to be with us. Please don't use it to hit either Rick or myself.
Could have been worse. It could have been a Zim photo.
It is been perfect spot for Zim right there on the end of the bat.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate you visiting.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe. Enjoy the golf. Hey, don't go anywhere because the ESPN Classic Chicago Roadshow continues, presented by Miller High Life. And guess who's joining us in just a moment? Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks. So don't go anywhere. We're getting set for baseball, 8 o'clock on ESPN. Baseball tonight follows us over on ESPN at 7 Eastern. That's a live look at Wrigley. Hopefully we're going to have baseball. Can't figure out if it wants to rain or be sunny or what, but we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope. See you in a minute.